Usually I do some preamble to set the match up, to set the scene, and prepare you for what's to come. But you watch the match, you're as disappointed as I am likely if you're a Kool-Aid, and I'm going to jump right in. Here are the 5 headlines from Barcelona's 3-3 draw with Inter Milan in the Champions League. One is again, and again, and again, and again, and again. I guess I can keep going with that headline, but I've been doing this now for about 5 years plus, 7 years in total, where I've really been covering Barcelona every match, watching all 90 minutes, game in and game out. And I know most of you come here for the nuance and some of the tactics stuff and some of the big picture stuff, but also what it means in the course of a season. Because again, when you're covering every single match, you've only got to really focus on what's to come and what just happened. And I kind of go through week by week, 2 shows a week, all that kind of stuff. You know what the content that you watch is. But for this match, of course, it's difficult to look at all the little things that happen, the tactical changes, the formations, like for like. And I think the big one here, of course, is Sergio Roberto, 25 minutes in, Xavi pushes him farther up forward. That helps to score the first goal, inverting him around the 18, and 15 minutes after that, when that new setup happened for Barcelona, Rafinha did outstanding to control a poor diagonal ball, find Roberto. Dembele scores the opener, and you get the sense that Barcelona have found their way, and everything is going to make sense in Catalonia. But at this point, there'll be more tomorrow on the podcast, but at this point, that's about the only tactical nuance I have for you. Because I was here for Roma, and Liverpool, and Bayern Munich again, and Benfica, and Eintracht Frankfurt. And I'm tired, and I'm frustrated. Again, it's the same thing over and over. It doesn't matter who's on the sideline, it doesn't matter who's on the field. FC Barcelona seems to do the same thing in Europe time and time after time again. My peak of disappointment came in the 68th minute, right after Inter Milan had scored that 2-1, where I felt like, just like everybody in that stadium there that had belief, believed in the team from the opening whistle on, that the team had lost belief. That this squad no longer thought that they were going to be playing in the next round of Europe because they went down 2-1. And I feel like I'm a generally optimistic person, and I would just scroll down and down and down. And it seemed like the internet agreed with the same sentiment that people in the stadium had, that this team has no belief. The mentality is wrong. Something has gone completely astray. And it's not like it came back and went away again. Now we're closing on to closer to a decade than to a half a decade since all these issues in Europe. And it's been a long half decade. Barca need points against Bayern and they need points against Victoria Pilsen, and they have to hope that Inter Milan drop points at home against Victoria Pilsen and lose to Bayern Munich. Even if Barcelona got some kind of result against Bayern Munich, Victoria Pilsen taking points off Inter Milan at their house, very, very difficult, almost impossible. So while I am usually positive, Barcelona are not going on to the next round of the Champions League. Xavi's comments after the game said as much. The disappointment, the sadness, he knows what the reality is for this team. And now I'll spend the next few months trying to figure out just how bad, and I've heard 25 million euros bad, dropping into the Europa League is for Barcelona. I don't know what that means in the big picture just yet for next summer and beyond, but I'm not excited to find out. More exhaustingly, all those who were reporting fatalistic views of Barca's finances will be back in full voice. So my warning to you, it's almost a little bit of a disclaimer, that in the next few days, don't be surprised if there are a bunch of stories coming out about Barca's finances and how bad all of this could be for Barcelona moving forward. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I'll have to look at the numbers myself, and we will have to see how this kind of result does affect Barcelona's revenue plan. Yes, there is that money up front that Barcelona are going to be missing out on by not making the knockout stages of the Champions League, but let's say Barcelona did somehow find a way to get all the way to the Europa League final and win that one. I'm interested to see what the disparity is between just making the next round of the Champions League, and let's say they were knocked out in that round, as opposed to actually going all the way and winning the Europa League. I'm not sure how much of a difference there is. I know that winning the Europa League is less money because of the big broadcasting deal that the Champions League has, but I just don't know how much money that is. So that's headline 1. There's no positive spin on it. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm exhausted. I want to thank OneFootball for sponsoring this video. OneFootball is the app that I use to stay up to date on everything FC Barcelona. But more importantly, because you know I'm watching every minute of Barcelona action, it does help me stay up to date with all the teams that Alemany might be scouting and looking at players for the next big transfer window. With a custom tailored homepage, stay up to date with breaking news, live scores, and even transfer news. While on the go, you can check with matches in live time and watch those La Liga highlights afterwards. And especially if you're in a place defending the good name of La Liga against other teams. Say in the UK and Ireland, you can watch La Liga highlights on the go and let them know that it's not just Real Madrid and Barcelona, regardless of what the table says. So use the link down in the description below for a free download of the OneFootball app on Android or iOS to put all your football in one place. And you also help out a tiny Barca channel like this one too. Thanks again to OneFootball. Now back to all things FC Barcelona. Headline 2 is final end of an era. Again, for those who've been with me, I feel like I've said that before. They may have been a headline in a past one before, as in one of these Champions League nightmares before. It's like just a reoccurring nightmare that we keep having over and over again. Because there are some online who are going to criticize Eric Garcia for the second goal. He was 88 minutes really, really good and then really bad on one possession by Lautaro Martinez, puts it in the back of the net. That gives Inter Milan the belief they need to go up 2-1 in that game. But aside from that, Eric Garcia is Barcelona's third center back, and I'm not too concerned about him, as I've talked about many, many times before. Because Eric Garcia aside, he is part of the future. The rest of this loss falls at the feet, so much of it at least, falls at the feet of Piqué and Busquets. I talked about on the podcast on Monday that the spacing between those two, for the physical limitations that they both have, they were my greatest fears in this match, and those fears not only came true, but came true in not only a physical way, but a mental way as well. That goal by Piqué, as in when Barcelona up 1-0 and the equalizer came for Inter Milan, was awful. I mean, truly, truly, truly awful from Gerard Piqué to completely allow Barella in behind. Barella gets the goal, and now that whole match is flipped on its head because of an awful individual mistake by Gerard Piqué. And on the second goal, I just said Eric Garcia, yeah, he got undressed by Lautaro Martinez, but Sergio Busquets gave the ball away in a place that Sergio Busquets cannot give the ball away. And that's kind of the margin of error that Busquets is working with, as we see, especially in Europe. In La Liga, when teams are going to be defending the way they are and the speed of that game, Barcelona can get results. They can grind out results, and Busquets is one of the better players for Barcelona in those La Liga matchups. He just controls a game in Spain. But once the competition is better counterattacking, once the talent, especially on those forward lines, has raised in the Champions League, it's too much for Busquets nowadays. It is, and that's the sad reality. Looking at the wage bill, you know what needs to be done, and you know he needs to go. The discussion about Busquets for next year, I think, is nuanced because of what he still is in Spain and what he still can be for this team in a certain role. But for Piqué, he should have gone last summer, like he promised. Again, this was awful from Piqué, truly awful. He has a contract and he's owed money, and you know I always vouch for players to get money. But after this performance and what this performance means for Barca's future, Piqué is holding the club he wants to return back to by staying in this capacity hostage and making what he wants to make of it. This truly is a if you love the club, then situation. Getting rid of Griezmann and Coutinho and Umtiti was something, but the soul of this team still lies with the veterans, whose mentality has doomed Barca over and over and over again. New players like Lewandowski were brought in. Hungry teenagers are playing well. And yet, the identity of FC Barcelona is still the same faces. It's disappointed Piqué, it's dejected Busquets, and it's Jordi Alba, who did not play in this match, complaining somewhere at all times. I'm tired, I'm frustrated. I'll say it again. 3 is Ter Stegen kept Barca in the Champions League. As gloom and doom as it is, and even Xavi has admitted that the Champions League campaign is over for Barcelona, because while we may be fans of Victoria Pilsen for the next few weeks, Barcelona still have to get a result against Bayern Munich. And one of the only ways they do that is if Marc-Andre Ter Stegen continues to play on his head. He has been phenomenal this year. It's 2 months in, and we can say without argument that Ter Stegen is very close, if not back to his very best, or maybe this is the best version of Ter Stegen. That save on Dumfries in the second half, that is what I hope to remember this Champions League campaign by. If somehow through an act of God, through some sheer force of will, everything goes Barcelona's way and they're in the knockout stage of the Champions League, which isn't going to happen, they should build a statue of Ter Stegen in front of the Camp Nou because of what he did today to keep this game from not being 5-3 or 4-3 in favor of Inter Milan. Even late on in that game, he had 2 crucial stops in stoppage time. The one on Asllani and then the one at the very, very death of this game. It should have been a wrap for Barcelona if not for the German goalkeeper, who has been fantastic. So there are positives to take from this, and that is that Ter Stegen, very much like the Valverde, Messi era, as I've said before, once again it's going to be Robert Lewandowski, a goal scorer, and Ter Stegen, the guy who doesn't concede goals, and a manager in what is Xavi, then it was Valverde, who's going to put out a team that's going to suffer and survive and make the most of it and get the best out of what they have with this squad. That's going to be the formula for Barcelona to win the Liga this season. And once again, in this matchup in the Champions League, Lewandowski is the one that keeps Barcelona alive with his head, and Ter Stegen is the one with his hands who kept Barcelona alive. 4 is from the jump. So much of this result is going to fall on Xavi. That's what happens to a manager. That's why this is the 4th manager for Barcelona to fail right on their faces in Europe. It's going to fall on the manager again. For Xavi, unlike some of the other ones, when those things happen, there are built-in excuses. Not having Ronald Araujo and not having Jules Koundé is almost enough to call us a wash. Barcelona were put in the group of death. That is no excuse, But again, they're drawn with Bayern Munich. So instead of fighting for first in a group, you basically begin a group stage in second place, fighting for the second and only spot left. So it's you against your direct rival Inter Milan. And Barcelona fell short that time around, so that excuse kind of dries up quickly. That said, the calls in Italy last week, we're not having a conversation we are now if it went differently. I was frustrated then about those, and this Champions League has just been not only Barcelona not good enough, but things haven't been good enough to go Barcelona's way. They've been unlucky, coupled with them not being good enough, and that means you're going to crash out. With Koundé and Araujo not healthy now, but potentially in the spring healthy, there is a scenario where Barcelona look way overqualified, very much like maybe Juve or Atletico Madrid. There are other teams in the Europa League to crash out too. But there is this world for Barcelona where they look way overqualified for the Europa League come the spring because they're the best team in it, because they're a squad that is complete and healthy and firing on all cylinders at that point in the spring. But as of today, there does come a moment when Xavi has run out of excuses. I said what my starting 11 was, and I wasn't really going to be working around that. Balde had to start over Alonso. Alonso, I defended him on the last podcast, saying that Xavi shouldn't have picked him. That was the problem against Inter Milan, that he doesn't fit what needed to be done. Now today it actually did make a little more sense with Dembele on the left. Alonso was going to be covering for him. But then you saw Balde come on, and there is nothing Alonso does defensively that is better than what Balde does defensively. I know that there's the exuberance of youth, or it's a young player and experience and all those things. You also don't want to derail him. But Alonso's performance today could have partially derailed a young player's career because instead of competing in the knockout stages of the Champions League, he's going to probably be competing in the Europa League. And he might be backing up Marcos Alonso, but I think moving forward, that hierarchy that Xavi, I think, has been flirting with, of Balde, then Alonso, then Alba, it's set in stone. It's Balde, then it's Alonso. That's done and dusted. And even the Busi, Frankie de Jong thing, it's questionable, but the way that Gerard Piqué played, if he was playing like that in training, that's on Xavi too. Then you've got to go with Frankie de Jong. I know it sounds crazy, but you've got to start Frankie as a center back. You've got to do something to get around it. So even though it's revisionist history, I mean, Frankie de Jong might have made 3 crucial errors and Barcelona lose 3-1 in that game, or something could have happened. So what Xavi didn't do is going to be seen as the right answer instead of what he did do, which wound up being the wrong answer. But unfortunately for Xavi, the excuses have run out. That said, you're never going to hear me say Xavi out. He's the manager of FC Barcelona for at least the next year or two. He's got a lot more failures to happen because this is a work in progress. It continues to be a work in progress. And what I hope the club can do, now finances, as I said, is going to be the question mark in the summertime and beyond. But as far as the emotions, as far as the mentality, the club has to just assume maybe this problem, this dark cloud, we can lift that once we get some of these veterans out of the club over the summertime. Again, you hope for those things. We don't have to get rid of any of our other jewels and diamonds and these great players we have because we're in financial trouble. But for Xavi, you've got to give him all the support and belief that he needs to win the Liga this season, or win the Copa del Rey, or win the Europa League. Because Barcelona need trophies. That's what Xavi needs to do this season. The pressure is still very much on because the excuses are gone. And 5 is don't burn it all down. I'm starting to sound a bit like a broken record here. That's understandable because, again, it's not about the tactical nuance in this match. It's about looking at the big picture. And as much of the gloom and doom that I've been talking about, who needs to go, what happened today, and the big ramifications, the bad ramifications of this kind of result, you still understand that you cannot burn it all to the ground. That's why, again, you're not going to hear me say Xavi out. That's why so much of this squad does excite me for the future still. As disappointed and as frustrated, as disheartened as I am, this is still a team that in 3 to 5 years could very well, or even 2 years or 3 years, win the Champions League. Like, that is fully and completely possible based on this progress, on the project that is being built. But unfortunately, it's not being built and erected in one summer or in one day. Just the signings just weren't enough. So it's going to have to be erected brick by brick by brick by brick. Because underpinning all that, there still needs to be fundamental change. The mentality needs to change. Okay, that's 4 managers in 6 failures in Europe. Major failures in Europe with 4 different managers. And now we're in an era where there is no Luis Suarez, there is no Bartomeu, there is no Valverde, there is no Quique Setién, there is no Koeman, and there is no Messi. And yet, the problems still remain. But if there is a light at the end of the tunnel, you did see some of that tonight. Barcelona did recruit the best goal scorer in world football today in Lewandowski over the summer. There is still pull of superstar level talent at FC Barcelona. You saw that Pedri was the best midfielder on the field, arguably the best player on the field again tonight. Barcelona still have Ter Stegen. Gavi is still a boss. Dembele is still a game changer. And Balde is Barca's left back for the long term. Ansu is still capable of being Ansu. And Rafinha, and Araujo, and Koundé. And maybe this team is a summer away. And if the club does find a way to continue to support Xavi, then the project is very much far along. It is pretty far along, even though this result is completely devastating. How devastating? That is left to be seen. I think that's why I'm afraid and disappointed. And as I said, I'm tired and I'm frustrated. So there is still, unbelievably, El Clasico this week, just a few days away. So we have a podcast coming out tomorrow that's going to be a part of this, part of previewing El Clasico, and a bit more. So I still got content to work on. I've got to put this one behind me pretty quickly, and I hope you can do the same. And as always, until next time, Forza Barça.